By this time, it should have been light enough to turn off the headlights, but the clouds and rain took over. It wasn't raining hard, more like a fine drizzle, but enough to keep the wipers going. The rain didn't bother me because I would go fishing in any weather as long as the water didn't freeze. It was a habit I acquired 6 years ago after my 2 children left for college. At that time, my family life took a drastic turn for the worse. For years, I had expected the kids to leave so that Marcy and I could spend some time together, if you know what I mean. Marcy took a different path. After the kids left, she found new interests and new friends, which didn't include me. Of course, being the gullible fool that I was, I initially had no idea that there was more to it than that. Luckily, I found out before it was too late. "Danny! Danny! Danny! Wake up! We're almost there!" Danny Green, my passenger and fishing buddy for the day, let out a loud groan as he raised his head at the side window of the truck. After a few more grunts and oohs, he reached for the thermos on the dashboard. "You're crazy, Terry. I have no idea why I let you talk me into this. I only get 2 Saturdays off a month, and you had to insist I go fishing with you today. Why today? You know I hate fishing." I smiled to myself as I watched Danny spill more coffee in his lap than went into his cup. It came out in a colorful stream of swear words as he struggled to wipe himself off, and at the same time try not to spill more. "This is special, Danny. I'll explain it all to you after we get out on the lake. I absolutely needed you to be with me today. Danny and I grew up together. He was now a detective with the City of Madison Police Department, and I was now an assistant director with the Parks and Recreation Department. We were both quite happy with our jobs and life in general. We weren't what you would call the closest of friends, but we were close enough to go fishing together. 10 minutes later, the rain had eased off just enough for us to launch the boat without getting completely soaked. Danny was still cursing and moaning as we pulled away from the dock and headed toward the fishing ponds. As you might expect, we had the lake all to ourselves. No one else had the sense to go out on a day like this. We were out of coffee, so all we had to drink was beer from the fridge. Danny looked in the fridge and then changed his mind. While it wasn't actually raining, it was damp and dreary. Not exactly beer weather. I just brought along some night crawlers and some porridge. No gudgeons today. Pulling into a quiet cove, we both cast bait and threw a couple lines. Danny got as comfortable as he could under the circumstances and looked me straight in the eye. He didn't need to say anything. I knew what he wanted. "Danny, I took you with me today because I need to get a fish alibi." That got his attention. What the hell is a fish alibi? It wasn't easy to explain. Now that I thought about it, it would probably sound stupid, too. Of course, when I planned the whole thing, I thought it was brilliant. "Danny, I need to be able to prove that I was here today and fishing. I need you to confirm it, and I need the fish to prove that you're not lying for me just because we're friends." My friend threw me an annoyed look as he reached into the refrigerator. I didn't think he went to get a beer to cool down, but rather to have a chance to comprehend my ridiculous explanation. He looked at me strangely and waved his hand, indicating he wanted to hear more as he unscrewed the lid. I didn't reply. I went for the icebox and got myself a long neck. It was too chilly for beer, but we drank one anyway. "You remember Hannah Marshall?" "Yeah, she married that trucker from Paxton. Big fella everyone said was with the devil dogs. Roscoe Boucher. They got married about 8 years ago. So what does Hannah Marshall, Boucher, have to do with your fish alibi?" "About 2 years ago, Marcy started dating Hannah. At first, I just thought it was a girl thing, you know, shopping and dining out and stuff." Go on, go on. "Where are you taking this Terry?" "Danny, I'm not the smartest guy in town, but it didn't take me long to realize that Marcy was running from me." "I don't want to mess with this Terry guy. I'm not going to stick my nose in your personal problems." Wait. I'm not asking you to stick your nose into my family life. All I want you to do is confirm that I was here with you today and that we got the fish to prove it." "Fish for an alibi?" "That's right. Without the fish, anything you say might look suspicious." Danny finished his beer but didn't pour another. "Damn it, Terry. I think you watch too many detective shows on TV. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. If I say we went fishing together this morning, that's the end of it. I'll feel better if we have fish." I heard my fishing partner groan as he pulled the line taut. Casting a fresh worm, he tilted his head to the side to look at me. "You still haven't told me why we're here, Terry. You still haven't told me why you need an alibi." I turned the motor on for about 5 seconds so we could sail closer to the pads near the shore. I was beginning to take a serious interest in what Marcy was doing, but I didn't know what to do about it. She doesn't really like to use the computer for anything, so I gave up on the idea of trying to track any activity there. Marcy loved her cell phone, but I had no idea how I could get any information by tracking her calls. Heck, I wouldn't know how to do it even if I wanted to. Okay. Cell phone rings. I get it. You're a technical nerd. What did you do? I bought 3 voice-activated digital tape recorders at Radio Shack. I put one in the kitchen, one in the living room, and the last one in the bedroom. I had to move the one in the kitchen 3 times to keep it from picking up noise from the refrigerator and other appliances. Since we are here under such unusual circumstances, I have to assume that this idea worked for you. Yes, all I learned in the first couple weeks was that Marcy and Hannah were seeing 2 guys on a regular basis. It bothered me so much that I didn't listen to any more records for about a week. Did you find out who they were? Hannah was dating a guy named Simon who worked at a gym on Bleecker Drive. I never got his last name. We had some problems at that place. It's not the kind of place a housewife goes to for aerobics. What about Marcy? You know a guy named Carmen who works at Monsanto Motors? Carmen Cambria? Oh my God, you're lucky. That guy's a big problem. We've been trying to nail him for years. How the hell did Marcy get involved with him? I have no idea, but it looks like they've been dating for almost a year. Danny pulled 2 bottles out of the fridge and tossed one to me. Okay, Terry. So, now I know Marcy is cheating on you with Carmen Cambria, but I still don't understand why you need an alibi. Most of the time, the conversations I pick up between Hannah and Marcy are irrelevant. Last Tuesday, when I got home, the tape from the living room was a little different. I made a couple copies and set one aside for you. I was silent for a moment, watching one of my floats bobbing on the surface of the water. It stopped moving and I spoke again. Why don't I just turn it on for you? Recording. We should do it on Saturday. Terry always goes fishing on Saturdays and he goes alone. That means he won't have an alibi. Saturday sounds good to me, but we have to do it early before Roscoe wakes up. I'll give the gun to Terry Carmen right after Terry leaves for the lake. I figure he'll be able to get to you around 8 o'clock. Is that early enough? That'll be great. Roscoe will be dead to the world anyway. He won't start moving until about noon on Saturday. Carmen said he'll shoot him once in the head and once in the heart, like they do in the movies. He will wipe off his prints and then leave the gun next to the body. You can call 911 and report the intruder. By the time the cops get there, Carmen will be here. Are you sure they can trace the gun back to Terry? I'm absolutely sure. He bought the gun from a friend of his who works as a detective. It's registered and it's easy to trace. Terry won't have anyone who can claim to have been on a fishing trip with him since he always goes alone. Just in case, Simon will be in Atlantic City until the end of Sunday. I can tell the police that Carmen was with me all morning if the need arises. Either way, it's time to put an end to this farce. Wow, I hope this all works out. I'll get $2 million in insurance money and you can watch Terry go to jail for a long, long time. Listen, girl, we gotta go. Kohl's opens in 10 minutes. Danny stopped drinking his beer and just stared at me. I've never heard anything more stupid in my life. What do you mean? Are you sure they weren't pulling your strings and setting you up? What do you mean? Well, maybe they found one of the tape recorders and knew you were eavesdropping, so they set up this little discussion to mislead you. I was thinking, anything's possible. Actually, I didn't go to the police and call you before because I wasn't sure myself. Danny finished his long neck and threw it in the trash. Are they talking about the Beretta I sold you 3 years ago? They must be. It's the only gun I own. Hell, I never even fired it once. It just sits on the night table by my bed all the time. Terry, if that's what it really is, it's not going to be pretty. How so? Do you realize that if you knew a murder was going to be committed and did nothing to prevent it, you could be considered an accessory? Who was I going to tell? Who would believe me? I played the tape for you and you don't even believe it. And you're my friend. So you didn't do anything? No! Last night when Marcy was asleep, I took the Beretta to the garage and I broke it. You broke it? Yeah. I made it so it wouldn't work. My fishing partner let out a long sigh. Well, that's a relief. I feel much better about the situation now. Good move, Terry. We still haven't caught a single fish. Danny pulled out one line and removed the float. I watched as he secured the lead sinker to the bottom and put a ball of gruel on the hook. He cast it into the water and fed the fishing line until it touched bottom. 2 minutes later, he pulled a 30-centimeter-long sucker into the boat. "All right, buddy. We got your alibi. Let's get the hell out of here. I have a feeling I'm going to get a call real soon if your tape wasn't fake." We'd been driving for about 20 minutes when Danny started verbally attacking me again. "Terry, I can't believe you let this get so messed up. It sounds like some weird urban legend you could read on the internet. Nothing makes sense." "Ah, come on, it's not that unbelievable, is it? It could have happened." "I don't think so. It's the worst planned crime of the century. No one would be stupid enough to try something like this. I can't believe you fell for it." "Okay, Mr. Know-It-All, if the conversation was a setup, what were they trying to get me to do? Did they want me to call the police? Did they want me to warn Roscoe? Did they want me to confront Carmen? Hell, maybe Marcy just wanted me to leave and file for divorce. Why would they do something like that?" "I don't know. I just can't believe it. Why would they leave a gun that was wiped clean of fingerprints if they were trying to frame someone? What about GSR and DNA? This isn't the 20th century. We now have the technology to clear up all that evidence." "Ha! Who's watching too much TV these days? Before they can figure it all out, I'll be rotting in a jail cell." Danny was just starting to crack a smile when his cell phone rang. "Detective Green." "What's up?" As Danny listened to the phone ring, I noticed he mouthed the words, "Oh, shit. Okay, give me the exact address, but it'll probably take me 10 minutes or so to get there. Keep everyone in the house and don't move anything unless absolutely necessary." Danny turned off his phone and leaned back in his chair. "I take it you know the way to Roscoe and Hannah's house?" 5 minutes later, he looked at me. "Stop smiling, you sneaky-ass son of a bitch. It's not funny." I was still smirking as we pulled up in front of the house. Danny quickly stopped the ambulance guys as they rolled the gurney to the van. After examining the passenger, he shook his head incredulously. A plainclothes officer approached him, and they soon had a lively conversation, complete with waving arms and indistinguishable shouts. There were at least 4 black and white cars with flashers on the street. Danny waved to me as they headed toward the house. "Detective Wallace, this is Terry Connor." "Terry, Don Wallace." As I shook his hand, he commented carelessly, "Oh, you're the guy with the gun." It was a comment somewhat posed as a question. Danny stopped and turned to him. "Wallace, who told you it was Terry's gun?" Don Wallace seemed a little uncomfortable with the question. "It was Mrs. Boucher. I asked her who owned the gun, and she didn't hesitate to name Terry Connor." "Don, how did she know that?" "I don't understand." "How did Hannah Boucher know that the gun belonged to Terry Connor?" "I don't know." "Have someone take her down to the station. We got a lot to talk about." Detective Wallace went into the house. Danny looked back at the ambulance pulling away. "I couldn't catch much of it, Danny, but from what I could see, he was in bad shape. Is Roscoe going to be okay?" "Roscoe? Roscoe's fine. That bloody mess on the way to the hospital is Carmen Cambria." "Oh, Terry, I thought you said you broke your gun." "I did. Hell, it took me about 2 hours. What the hell did you do to it?" "I drilled a small hole in the barrel and then inserted the bolt into it. When I was done, it seemed to block the barrel pretty well. I broke 4 drill bits making that hole. Why do you ask?" "Why didn't you just take the bolt out?" I didn't know how to do that. Danny took a deep breath and smiled slightly at me. "It looks like Carmen decided to wake Roscoe up just before he shot him. I guess it was some kind of macho move. Anyway, when Carmen pointed it at Roscoe's head and pulled the trigger, it exploded and ripped off half of his hand. He lost his thumb and 2 other fingers. It only took Roscoe a few seconds to realize what was happening. He was still beating Carmen 5 minutes later when the police finally arrived. They had to hit him with a stun gun to drag him away. Well, I kind of broke it. It didn't really work." "Jesus, Terry, I can't believe all this." When we got inside, Detective Wallace was bringing Hannah out in handcuffs. I think he realized something. Danny looked back at Wallace as he walked by. "Go to 321 David Drive and pick up Marcy Connor as well. And whatever you do, don't let the 2 of them get together. Use 2 cars." Roscoe sat at the kitchen table. The EMT was treating his hands with some kind of antiseptic. It must have hurt a little, but he didn't even flinch. He looked up sharply when he saw Danny and me. Terry, Was that damn gun yours? I looked at Danny with a guilty expression on my face, not knowing what to say. Yeah, it was mine, but I didn't give it to him. I keep it in my nightstand for protection. Well, you're damn lucky you never had to use it. I don't know what was wrong with it, but I'm one lucky son of a bitch. Danny realized my dilemma and stepped in. Roscoe, Terry found out about what Carmen was going to do, but didn't know how to handle it. He notified me this morning, but he broke out the Beretta just in case. That's why the whole thing blew up. Jesus, Terry, why didn't you let me know? I was afraid I might be wrong or they might change plans if the first one didn't work. If it wasn't real, none of this would have happened. I'm sorry, Roscoe, but I sure as hell didn't know what to do. I did the best I could. All right. I don't like it, but I understand. By the way, why didn't you just pull the bolt? Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Danny smile as I groaned at Roscoe's obvious question. Roscoe stood up and put his hand on my shoulder, heading towards the refrigerator. Don't worry about it. You did a great job. Weirdly, but good. He grabbed a bottle of V8 juice from the top shelf and took a few big gulps. I went outside while the police sorted out everything else that needed to be done. 20 minutes later, Danny came out and told me to go home. I wasn't looking forward to it, but Marcy wouldn't be there anyway, so it didn't matter. When I got home, I found that Marcy had made fresh coffee. I guess she was expecting guests. I drank 2 cups and then plopped down on the couch for a little nap. Getting up at 4 a.m. sometimes makes me drowsy later in the day. About 5 hours later, I was awakened by a phone call. Terry? Terry, it's Wilbur. Marcy just called me from the courthouse and asked me to come over and bail her out. She didn't tell me anything else. What the hell is going on? Why didn't she call you? Wilbur, I'm afraid your daughter's in a little trouble. She didn't call me. In fact, she probably won't even talk to me. You're going to have to get her to explain it to you herself because I'm afraid you won't believe me. Damn, that sounds ominous. Is she hurt or something? No, she's fine. When you bail her out, please take her back to your place. I'll get all her clothes and stuff there as soon as I can. Can you raise the money you need? Yeah, that won't be a problem. What about the kids? Do they know? I'll let them know, Wilbur. Don't worry about it. After my father-in-law hung up the phone, I grabbed a half-dozen garbage bags and started stuffing them with Marcy's outfits. I emptied the dressers first and then the closets and bathroom. Anything else that could be put away, she could pick up later. I put the alibi fish along with her best dresses and threw the bags in the stern of the boat. I called my son Benson at his apartment in Clarksville. He had been stationed at Fort Campbell for the past 2 years. I told him his mother was in a bit of a jam, but didn't go into details. I knew he had many more questions, but I didn't want to go into details at this point. My daughter Sharon didn't take it all so calmly. She had been living in Baltimore with her new husband for about a year now. Since I refused to explain to her what was going on, she let me know that she would be home first thing in the morning. For some reason, she seemed a little upset with me. I didn't push it. 20 minutes later, I stacked all of Marcy's bags on the porch of her parents' house. No one was in the house when I arrived, and I didn't feel like waiting. I headed to the Outback for dinner. I had a hard time finding a parking spot with the boat in the back of the truck. I got a good night's sleep that night. Sunday I could do almost nothing, so I spent the day taking inventory of everything. I decided it was time to move on. I made 2 lists, what I could leave behind and what I wanted to take with me. It was pretty simple. I decided to take all the money I could get my hands on and give up everything else. I didn't need a house, and since my needs were simple, I could find some kind of work almost anywhere. At this point, I saw no reason to get a divorce. I had pretty much finalized everything when Sharon came along. My daughter was unusually silent as we entered the kitchen. She made herself comfortable while I made a fresh batch of coffee. A cheerfulness began, and I sat down. I'm sorry about all this, Daddy. You have nothing to be sorry about. The first 5 minutes I was talking to Mom, she was screaming that you tried to kill some guy named Carmen that I'd never heard of. I found out later that he was her lover. I had no idea she was cheating on you. For over a year. When I asked her why she was in jail and you weren't, she gave me a ballistic lecture. While Grandma calmed her down, Grandpa took me into the kitchen and explained everything to me. Apparently, he learned the whole story at the courthouse from Danny Green while she was being prepped for release. Sharon, I'm sorry you got caught up in this story. I tried to keep it from you and Benson. It's all stuff you don't need to know. I poured 2 cups of coffee and added creamer. In fact, I know everything I need to know. I came here to support my mom, but I don't really have that desire anymore. I'm going home from here. Do you need any help? No, I'm fine, but I'm afraid this fiasco is going to make me the local laughingstock. I'm going away for a while. I don't know where, and I don't know how long, but I'm leaving in the next few days. You're not going to stay for Mom's trial? No. Tomorrow I have to testify about what happened, but after that they say I'm free to go. If they need me for anything, they can always find me. I mean, will you stick around to help or support your mom? Are you kidding me? She tried to kill a man for insurance money and blame it on me so she could be with her lover and send me to prison for a few years. Why would I want to do anything to help her? We talked for another 10 minutes and then Sharon left for Baltimore. The day was going to take an interesting turn. I wasn't very hungry, so I just stuck an English muffin in the toaster for dinner. The first time I heard a rumble was when I took the food out of the oven. Before the toaster finished its job, the rumble turned into a huge rumble and really got my attention. I looked out the front door and saw at least 30 motorcycles pulling up to the house. I easily recognized Roscoe on the front motorcycle. There was no discussion. He simply walked up to me, handed me his helmet, and turned to walk back to the Harley. I followed him and sat in the saddle behind him. As we pulled away, I realized I hadn't even closed the front door of the house. I giggled because I realized I didn't care about that. It was exciting at first, but after an hour I had had enough. It wasn't hard to figure out that we were headed to Atlantic City, and I had a pretty good idea why. What I couldn't figure out was my contribution. By the time we arrived at the Taj Mahal, the number of motorcycles had somehow doubled. The noise they made entering the underground parking lot was deafening. Most of the riders headed to the general area of the casino, while Roscoe, myself, and 3 others headed for the elevators leading to the main hotel. The 3 guys got off on the 7th floor, but me and my escort continued upstairs. I noticed that all the security cameras were covered in some kind of foam insulating spray. Roscoe seemed to know exactly where he was going and how to get there. 2 minutes later, we were on a rooftop overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. We stood in silence, and he noticed me looking at him as if silently waiting for an explanation, which I didn't really want. He smiled and put his huge hand on my shoulder. You did a great job, Terry. You did a great job. Around the same time, 3 lads joined us on the roof with a new player. Simon Walcott was definitely scared to death when he reluctantly arrived. Although he worked at a commercial gym, physically he was no match for Roscoe. Once again, not a word was uttered. Roscoe simply grabbed Simon by the neck and the waistband of his pants and threw him off the edge of the roof. 5 minutes later, the 4 of us were on our way home. The rest of the group stayed at the casino. Roscoe dropped me off at the house. The other 3 guys disappeared down the road somewhere. I handed him back his helmet and we smiled and again said nothing. I liked that guy. I slept well that night. Danny came in early the next day. He called several times on Sunday night to check on me but got no answer. I just smiled and said I had too much to drink and passed out. It didn't get any further than that. It had been a busy day. I had everything planned out and it went smoothly. I spent the day closing accounts and putting unfinished business in order. I called Wilbur to see how he was doing. He had arranged for Marcy's mortgage and she was settling into their house. He asked if I wanted to talk to her, and I said no. I'm not sure if she was up for it or not, but he felt obligated to ask. Hannah didn't have anyone to bail her out, so she was going to remain a guest of the county until her trial. I was just about to go to Taco Bell for dinner when Danny called again to let me know that Simon had been found dead in Atlantic City. He asked me if I knew where Roscoe was. He didn't seem amused when I laughed at his question. His demeanor improved a bit when I told him to come by my house to get his new boat. Heck, I didn't need it anymore, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time trying to sell it. I spent the next 4 weeks living with Sharon and her family. Every day I'd go down to the harbor and just hang out among the tourists. Danny was more than willing to tell me how things were back home. Marcy and Hannah had avoided trial by pleading guilty to a variety of charges. They both received sentences ranging from 3 to 5 years. The Atlantic City police had no idea what had happened to Simon and were not even actively investigating the case. Monsanto Motors mysteriously burned to the ground. More than 87 cars died in the fire. There were no leads. Carmen Cambria spent more than 2 weeks in the hospital and now awaited trial on various charges, including attempted murder. Roscoe agreed to stay in the area until Carmen's trial. I seemed to have lost all interest in fishing.